Today we are talking to Professor Ian Holman from the Cranfield University, who will give us an insight on what Impressions European Case Study is all about. So hi Ian.
Hello.
My first question is, why is the project concerned about high-end climate scenarios?
Well, when the climate modelers are producing their projections of how the climate might change into the future, they make assumptions about the levels of greenhouse gas emissions. So they use different scenarios of emissions, some with low amounts of greenhouse gas emissions by society, and others that have higher amounts. Now, currently, when we compare the estimates of the actual emissions with those different projections that the climate modelers are using, we as a society are really at the upper end of the emissions. So we're very much at the moment heading towards those high-end scenarios, and the climate projections with sort of lower levels of cooling are looking increasingly unlikely. In terms of how Europe will be affected, well, if we're going into those high-end futures where summers will be warmer, winters will be warmer, then that's going to have an effect on European agriculture. It's going to have an effect on winter tourism, on floodings and droughts. So I think really all aspects of society, the landscapes that we live in, they're all going to be affected, but to a greater or lesser extent. Part of the challenge of Impressions is really trying to better understand how those high-end scenarios will affect Europe.
Okay, and what are the impacts that the European case study will investigate in particular?
The European case study is trying to look at quite a broad range of impacts. So some of those impacts are to do with how society will change in the future. So, for example, the demand for housing and for urban areas for European society. And then some aspects that are driven by the climate, like flooding, and then other impacts that cut across climate and socioeconomics. So agriculture, forestry, biodiversity, water resources. But we're also trying to explore how the impacts between those different, what you might think of as sectors, how they interact. So if climate changes the water in the rivers, then that affects the amount of water that agriculture can use for irrigation. And so therefore European cropping and those farmers that depend on irrigation might make different decisions.
The project actually takes a step beyond assessing possible impacts towards offering possible solutions for the future. How are you planning to do that?
That's right. I mean, it's interesting to know what impacts are, but really people want to know about the solutions and the opportunities. So what can you do to try and ensure that impacts don't happen or are reduced as much as possible? So we're sort of looking at that in, I suppose, two main ways. With the models, we try and represent how people or society might adapt in a reasonably realistic way. So, for example, if these high-end scenarios are projected to lead to difficulties with water resources, so not enough water, then we can try and estimate with the models we're using how using more efficient technologies in water appliances, or how people changing their behaviour to be more water conscious might affect water resources and water demand. So we try and model the actions that people take in as realistic a way as possible. The other approach we're doing will be working with stakeholders where they'll be trying to develop pathways or adaptation plans for how they think Europe should adapt or respond to high-end scenarios, and then we'll try our best to model the effect of the stakeholders' pathways and plans.
And Impressions actually has a number of case studies, so how will the results from the European case study benefit the regional ones?
Well, the Impressions case studies are quite different. So we have the Hungarian case study, which is very small geographically, up to the sort of the Scottish and Iberian case studies, which are larger. I think for the Hungarian case study, because it's so local, it's very difficult for the European case study to provide results which are going to be credible at the level of a town or community. So I think we will not be able to provide that case study with very much other than some broad framing probably for the country. For Scotland and for the Iberian case study, I think some of the results that we produce will be relevant. So for Iberia, our models can simulate how agriculture in that region will sort of dynamically respond to changing demands for food and changing crop yields. And we can feed that information into the Iberian models, which aren't themselves able to simulate farming change.
Okay, sounds like you have a lot of exciting work ahead, so we'll be looking forward to the results. And thank you for taking part in Inside Impressions today.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.